I'm delighted that Aubrey has agreed to join us today. Aubrey, I met Aubrey maybe a decade ago when we were both at Carnegie Mellon University, and when Aubrey was just beginning to investigate social robotics and the use of robots to handmade and other robots to assist people socially, whether children on the Asperger's spectrum or older people. And that turned out to be a pretty lucrative or successful and productive career for many years, and maybe in some way led her to her current most recent job at the Food and Drug Administration. And through that, in a conversation on the way to the ski slope, I learned about the FDA and e-health, but I think now you'll all get to hear about it.
Thanks so much, Mark. And, you know, for everybody's little bit of background information, I was in Mark's Making Things Interactive class, definitely over a decade ago. And, you know, I was really interested in working on socially assistive technology and assistive technologies. And it turned out I spent my whole career in a space that I now know is called digital health. And I now work at the Digital Health Center of Excellence at the FDA, where this is super relevant and interesting to folks at Atlas is a wildly interdisciplinary space where we touch everything from, you know, virtual reality to, you know, to robots, to, you know, fertility apps, to all sorts of things are in our space, including even, and this is not, I would like that to not show up there, including recently there have been actually video games that have been cleared as clinical treatments for diseases such as ADHD. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to actually ask some questions. I know we've got some folks from different spaces, and I'll do my best to answer things as best I can while actually representing the FDA. So what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of a background on digital health technologies in general. Just kind of what is that? What does that encompass? You know, are you already working on a digital health technology? You know, what does that mean? And then the Digital Health Center of Excellence. And I've been told there's a way to shut these off. I'm just going to ignore them. What our role is to empower developers, researchers, folks like you, how we're working with them. And then intro to software as a medical device. So just because something isn't a physical object doesn't mean that the FDA doesn't consider it a medical device. And so that, I think, is something that a lot of people don't realize. You know, hey, you have an app that runs on a virtual reality headset or maybe a robot. Is that a medical device? It turns out it just might be. And it's absolutely worth knowing how the FDA is thinking about things. And I don't know if I want to see if there's a way for me to stop this, because I don't want to have the recording show all of those notifications. Okay, so moving forward.
We're not seeing the notifications, Aubrey.
Oh, you're not? Oh, thank you so much.
We're just seeing your screen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. They're coming up over my screen. So since I'm sharing the only window instead of my whole screen, thankfully, thank you for letting me know. That would have been really tough. Okay, so digital health is the convergence of technology and healthcare. And the important thing to understand when you're thinking about digital health is that encompasses everything from healthy living to management of chronic conditions. So that can be home care, that can be prevention, diagnosis, treatment. And the exciting opportunity of digital health is really moving healthcare from clinics to wherever the patient is, and this opportunity to understand physiology and behavior in the real world, and really leveraging computing power, sensors, all of these new technologies to really benefit patients. And I've actually shared a similar image to this before in previous talks, but when you think about a digital health technology, that can really be a lot of things. And a lot of these new tools that may be wearables, that may be smart glasses, they provide consumers with valuable health information. And we've seen that consumers who are better informed are able to make better health decisions. And but the thing is, as folks like us who are inventing and creating new things, or I guess folks like everyone on the call, what qualifies as a digital health product, and what digital health technologies actually need regulation. So, and another really important part about that is that these digital health technologies are frequently a part of the patient's lifestyle, and they are creating or generating patient health data. And that's a really important part of how these technologies work, the fact that it's really within the context of their lives. And it's also really valuable to consider that it's not just, when we're thinking about digital health products, it's not just the product that the consumer necessarily uses, but there are also cases where digital health technology is incorporated into another medical product or a pharmacological product. It could be an adjunctive or companion thing to a drug. It could be used for the development of a medical product. It could be used to study a medical product or a drug. You've probably seen cases where wearable devices have been a part of validating or studying other medical products. And it's really valuable to think about that whole space. And so as you're kind of thinking about these things, there are a whole bunch of different spaces that are coming together here. And it's, so you might have wearables that are looking at vital signs, or things that are part of telecare, telemedicine, things more for healthcare analytics, things that are more service related. And then something that I think comes up a lot more in the kind of innovation and creative technology space are things that are more in this health and wellness space. So things that might improve cognitive function, promote healthy living, or addressing stress or anxiety, things like that. And then also different disability solutions. Something that's been in the press a bit more lately is some of the diagnostic and therapeutic opportunities in digital health. And, there have actually been some apps that have been gotten market approval recently to assist in the diagnosis of early autism. And so it's just really important to realize this is a big space, and it's independent of the particular hardware involved. So here at the Digital Health Center of Excellence, our goal is really empowering the advancement of healthcare. And we are really focused on empowering stakeholders by fostering responsible and high quality digital health innovation. We're really working on building partnerships to accelerate digital health advancement. We're really focused on sharing knowledge, increasing awareness, driving synergies, advancing best practices. We participate in standards development, which I know is a talk that was on the list recently, and I was really sorry to miss the standards discussion. And then also, innovating in the regulatory approach space. A lot of folks don't realize that our regulatory authority is actually, stemming from mechanisms put in place back in the 1970s. And a lot of the technology that we're using today is pretty different from what folks might have had in mind at that point in time. And so, we want to make sure that as we're addressing these new solutions, that we're providing an efficient and least burdensome oversight. So, our areas of focus include software as a medical device, which is definitely not to be confused with software in a medical device, artificial intelligence, machine learning, wearables, wireless connectivity, interoperability, medical device cybersecurity, VR, AR, mixed reality, real world evidence, and advanced clinical studies is a big part of what we care about, looking at some of the post-market space, and also a bit of advanced manufacturing and patient-generated health data. So, again, what we're doing is providing clarity on regulation. So there are a number of folks who are kind of getting into this space who might be from innovations or consumer electronics and never really considered that they might be interacting with the FDA. And so, we're around to provide clarity on regulation, to really help with international harmonization, because Europe and Australia and actually Canada all have their own mechanisms where they are looking at software as a medical device. I think a really important thing that I would like to impart to this audience is, if you look in the popular media and such, you'll hear folks talk about digital therapeutics or digital medicine, a bunch of these different terms in this space, but the FDA doesn't really think or regulate things in those terms. We think about things in terms of whether they're a medical device, and that's really different than the platform. So we're not using some of these same terms. Within the FDA, the Digital Health Center of Excellence actually plays a really important role. And part of that is providing digital health expertise internally, because we have a lot of these different review divisions who, within the FDA, there are a number of different offices of health technology. So if you're working on something for diabetics, it's going to go specifically to the office that reviews things for diabetes. So that group may or may not have expertise in digital health technology. I will tell you at this point in time, they definitely do, because they get a lot of things around digital health. But part of our role is within the agency, educating folks on these different technologies, offering training opportunities, and really are So I'm gonna kind of jump forward and talk about some of the exciting things that are happening in this landscape right now. So a lot of folks have seen that Apple and Samsung and Fitbit have these over-the-counter ECG apps now, where your heart rate and such are being monitored. And those are applications that are authorized by the FDA. So in case you're wondering, is Apple really talking to the FDA? Is Samsung, are these different? They are, yes, actually, we are engaging with all of them, and it's a really important part of the process. I already mentioned, it's actually called Endeavor RX, this FDA, and I always get caught. There are actually different. If you hear of an FDA product that has been cleared versus approved versus granted, those are actually different terminologies that are indicating the regulatory process by which the particular medical device went through. So this particular video game was a de novo, which means it was a first of its kind. So there was no prior application like that that had been approved by the FDA. There have also been a number of digital therapeutic apps that have been approved for insomnia, substance abuse disorder, opioid use disorder, and diabetes management. And so again, all of these are apps that have undergone clinical trials. And it's a really exciting time. There's also, in the space of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're now seeing instances where, the use of AI/ML can actually help diagnose individuals with diabetes who had not been previously diagnosed. So I think something that's important for this group, especially seeing some of the folks on the call and knowing that you're working in some emerging spaces, is like, how do you collaborate with the Digital Health Center of Excellence? And there are a bunch of different ways to do it. There are a number of different research initiatives that are ongoing that that you can participate in and be a part of. But I think one of the most important ways, and something that I'm very involved in, is the digital health inbox. So sometimes you might have a question about particular policies, maybe something you're developing, maybe something, an IRB that you're working on, and you're like, oh, I don't know, is this considered digital health? Is there anything special we need to do? You can actually write the digital health at fda.hhs inbox, and a team of helpful regulatory digital health experts will get back to you. And if they're not the right person to talk to, they will indeed direct you to the right person. We're a little slow at responding, but we will always get back to you in 7 to 14 days. And I highly encourage everyone to do that. And there are also opportunities to participate as a patient and as a developer through the sort of collaborative communities initiatives. So now I want to kind of jump into something that I think is a bit more meaty, which is what is a device? And so per section 201H of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, a device is an instrument, an apparatus, an implement, machine, contrivance, implant, in vitro reagent, or other similar related article, including a component part or accessory. And I'm going to, recognized by the official national formulary of the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is not going to apply to anything anyone here is doing, but more applicable here, is intended for use in the diagnosis of a disease or other conditions, or in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of a disease in a man, animals, or intended to affect the structure or any function of a man or an animal's, and that does not achieve its primary purpose through chemical interaction. And there's a little bit more to it, but I think the important thing there is that it's kind of broad. There's a lot of stuff there, and does your app, does your wearable do some of these things? Is it intended for treatment, prevention, or to affect, affect a person in any way? Well, so that's why we kind of get to this section here. The 21st Century Cures Act actually updated the definition of a medical device, specifically understanding that as we are working in this new technology and software space, we kind of took this chunk out of what might be a device and excluded certain software functions. And I believe this update was in 2016. However, even though the updates happened at this point in time, it's kind of been a while, and a lot of folks are still kind of getting up to speed with what that means. So, the Cures Act made this amendment, and certain things have been excluded, which include software functions that are intended for administrative support of a care facility, certain functions intended for maintaining or encouraging a healthy lifestyle when there's no reference to a disease or condition. This one's kind of tricky, and I'm going to get into that one a little bit more, because I think that's a place where we might be working on, or folks here may be considering wearables, robots, video games, all kinds of things that might kind of fit in that space. Certain software functions intended to serve as electronic patient records, certain functions intended for transferring, storing, or converting formats, or displaying certain data and results. And then also certain software functions that are intended for clinical decision support. So these are the kind of spaces, areas where there have been carve-outs in the definition of a medical device legally, and that you have to keep in mind as you are developing these products. And so it's really important to think about the definition of terms as the FDA thinks about them. So when we're talking about a function, we're talking about the distinct purpose. And that's a device software function is something that meets the device definition. Now, it's very possible that you may have other functions in your product. Maybe they're entertainment, maybe they're helping self-management, maybe they're a number of different things that definitely don't meet the definition of a device. But that doesn't mean that your product or whatever you're developing isn't subject to oversight. So then you might have something that either wouldn't meet the definition of a device or is 510K exempt. 510K exempt basically means that you don't need to talk to the FDA before you market or you promote your product. And then there are also things that meet the definition of a device, but FDA has expressed its intention not to enforce compliance with applicable regulatory controls. What that means is it's in this enforcement discretion camp. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means. So it's like a function could be the intended use or like a subset of the intended use of a product. So you might have something that's living well with diabetes, right? Or this video game will help you live well with diabetes. And so overall, most of that product, just as I describe it there, is actually outside of the scope of what we might necessarily need to look at, but there might be another function within that product. Maybe it connects to somebody's continuous glucose monitor, or their or some other element that then would subject it to device oversight. So another really important term, and you see these like 21 CFR. So the CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulations. And prior to working at the FDA, that was definitely not something that was top of mind that I was thinking about all the time. But it is something that we think about and we talk about a lot, because as we're providing folks feedback and insights about how to consider their products, it's really important to consider the basis by which we're making these recommendations, where the sort of regulatory authority is coming from. But when we think about the intended use and how that is how that's communicated, that's any type of express claims and representation. So whatever you might have on your website, whatever you might have in a video, anything around the circumstances of sale or distribution. So say if you have your app, your video game for helping people live well with diabetes, and then you have like some sort of radio ad or a commercial where somebody's like, it cured my diabetes, that actually subjects you, that can impact the way the FDA is looking at your product and what oversight you might be subject to. So that's really important to consider as you're developing things. So even though all of the documents you submit may look one way, or it's just important to think about the whole package. So it's really, as you're developing things, whether it's a game or robot or VR or whatever, it's, what is the regulatory pathway? Are you not a device, which basically means you don't need to talk to us at all. Are you something that might meet the definition of a device, but it's something for which, the FDA intends to exercise enforcement discretion, which means that based on the profile of your product, your application, we don't intend to kind of look under the hood and figure out like, are you this, are you that, unless we get some kind of, complaint or concern, in which case we're going to look into it. Or is it something that is specifically the focus of FDA's oversight, and in which case you would be required to engage with the FDA prior to marketing your product or using it in any type of, in some cases, using it in any type of research as well. So it's helpful to have examples of software functions and their sort of relative regulatory approach. So software functions that are intended for individuals to log, track, evaluate, or make decisions or behavioral suggestions related to maintaining general fitness, health, or wellness with no specific reference to a disease or condition, those are not a device, right? So the sort of like Fitbit for everybody, or another example, you'll see Gatorade has these, it's kind of like a Band-Aid that you put on, and it sucks up your sweat and gives you information about yourself. That's, again, this is falling into this camp. Now, if that same product was for people with diabetes, now you're in a different camp. And it's just, it's really important to understand. And that's why when you're thinking about the device function, the claims, it's really important to keep in mind how you are framing things. Now, when we think about things in this camp of intention to exercise enforcement discretion, so this includes software functions that provide periodic educational information, reminders, or motivational guidance, for example, with smokers who are trying to quit, patients recovering from addiction, or pregnant women. So these are things who the particular product itself may fall within the device definition, but because of the risk profile, it could kind of fall within this category where of enforcement discretion. And then we kind of get into this place, which is the focus of FDA's oversight. So that could be a software function that uses a sensor or a lead that's connected to a mobile platform to measure and display like electrical signals, like such as an ECG. Or this is really important to know. It's possible to use a mobile platform as a medical device. So, for example, if you create a stethoscope app that runs on any mobile phone, since the stethoscope is something that is already regulated by the FDA, that is something that would be subject to oversight. So even though you're not including any leads or anything on there, that is something that before you would market it, or something that you would need to be engaging with the FDA. So that's a lot of different things. How do people navigate this? How do people think about this? So we've created a ton of different guidances to help folks navigate this space, to interpret these different policies and regulations. And these are all available on the FDA website. And the really valuable, important thing for folks to know here is, like, some of these guidances are kind of big, maybe kind of confusing, and you can always reach out again to digital health at fda.hhs, and we can help you interpret and navigate these policies. And trust me, we get folks interacting with us all the time. And so you can always go to fda.gov/digital health. The digital health inbox, again, it takes us a little while to respond. It's always going to be less than 2 weeks, but we will give you a comprehensive response. And we're always excited to see what people are working on. And as I opened with, I'm a digital health specialist at the Digital Health Center of Excellence. I'm specifically in the policy group, which is a lot of fun. And with that, I kind of would like to open it up to questions.
Aubrey, I'm curious if you know what the industry is like on this right now. Like, are there people who work as like contract filing preparers? Like, it's such a new space. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so there are absolutely folks who are working as regulatory consultants to help folks submit products. There have always been organizations that help folks submit their products to the FDA. I will say that if you're in the digital health space, it's really valuable to engage early and to also leverage some of the informal ways that you can talk to the FDA. So there is like the Q-Sub program, which is a free program that allows you to submit, for example, questions about clinical data that you might be collecting or claims that you want to make. There are other opportunities such as a 513G, which is a request for classification. That is a paid thing, but where that is something that you can use to engage with the FDA and get a kind of somewhat more formalized response on how your product might be classified, what sort of regulation it might be subject to. But I don't know if that answered your question, but there are definitely a number of different consultants out there who can help with these things. But I would engage on your own where you can as well.
Yeah, that definitely answers my question. And I have a follow-up question, which is like, where are things at in terms of politics as well? Like, is Congress making moves to continue regulating, or is it more like how it used to be with like drugs and other devices where it's just like, we'll wait until it becomes a problem and then we'll address it?
I would say that it's pretty clear that FDA has the authority to regulate in the digital health space. I did not get into the kind of deeper artificial intelligence and machine learning related work that we're doing. So I would say within these kind of 1970s mechanisms, we do have sufficient authority for oversight. And I don't in any way, shape, or form see that going away. If anything, I would see some adjustments, and I think there are opportunities for kind of future development in that space. So stay tuned.
What would be your advice, Aubrey, to someone, whether an individual researcher or a small company inventing some device? At what point in the trajectory should they contact the FDA, and why?
Yeah. So it depends on what you're developing, what your intended use and your indications for use are. So if, and by indications for use, if this is specifically for somebody with a medical condition, it might make sense to engage with the FDA sooner. And it's helpful to know that, writing the digital health inbox, the Q submission program, like I mentioned, those are free programs to engage with the FDA early and often. The reason to engage would be if you feel that there is some chance that the product that you're developing might be subject to oversight. So that could be a case where it might have a bit more risk. That could be a case where maybe you think that this product is likely to be covered by insurance at some point in time. I think a lot of the time, cases where something may be covered by insurance, or where you think your product might be covered by insurance, it might have a risk profile that's different than you think. And so by engaging, at least informally, folks can give you a bit of feedback of how to either look at the different policies and interpret them to make sure that you're not hitting in the device space, which means that you're not beyond the enforcement discretion space, or where where if you are in a space where the FDA intends to have oversight, like should you have certain considerations within your IRB, and if you're actually kind of crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's, it's going to be easier for you to get either funding or approvals later down the line. It can help with offering credibility to your product and endeavor. Was that helpful?
Mm-hmm. You folks don't run tests yourselves, but how does that work? If I've got some questionable device, whose responsibility is it to do the testing and oversee the testing?
So primarily folks at the FDA are reviewing the data that is submitted as part of the submission process for pre-market approvals. Now we need the whole protocols and everything. There's a whole section of what to prepare and how to submit things to the FDA. However, there are instances where we will take sample products or look at demos of different products, which I have seen in digital health more than in other medical devices. You know, we're not going to necessarily, I've got to be careful with what I say, but it's always helpful to have a demo. I mean, just like, and whenever you make it easy for somebody to see a demo, I think it's something that the FDA isn't necessarily always going to ask for. But there have definitely been times where someone has submitted things for us to review, provided a login, things like that. And it's very helpful for providing feedback.
I'll keep going. So Carson Bruns here and his tattoo inks that turn colors depending on either solar exposure or perhaps insulin levels or other. So now what is that? It's not exactly, it's a set of molecules that's making up the tattoo inks, but it's kind of more a mechanism than it is a chemistry. So where does that fall in the scheme of things? Or does it depend on which signals it's responding to, right? If it's responding to sun, then it's not a drug. I don't know.
Okay, so I'm specifically in CDRH, which is the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. Whether that winds up being in biologics, because there's also a biologics group, but the big thing that's important to think about from my point of view is does it meet the definition of a medical device? And again, that comes down to the intended use or the indications for use. So if these are tattoos specifically for people with diabetes, to help them monitor their insulin level, that's regulated. Yep. I don't know if I can say things that conclusively, but definitely would talk to someone about that.
Yeah, but would you, I mean, and obviously you don't I'm just asking personal opinion. Is it a drug or is it a device?
I am not going to be recorded answering that question. but I will say it again, intended use and indications for use. If this is for, everyday person just to, express their responses to their environment, you're going to be in a different space than if it's for a particular medical condition and use. So it's really important to think of how the FDA is looking at things and sort of where the basis and the authorities are kind of stemming from. Come on, folks, you guys can't have Mark ask all the questions. This is an opportunity to ask questions, and I can try. I will do the best I can to answer. And I guess I'm still sharing my screen here, so I'll stop my share. And feel free to turn on videos.
I'll turn my video back on. Interesting talk in an area that I don't know that much about, so I'm kind of learning along the way. I wonder if you could comment about what you were saying about the developer community, this collaborative community for developers, and how are they doing that? And is it more software oriented? Is it more hardware, both? You know, what can we do?
I would say that it's definitely not just software. I think we get a primary amount of software related things, but as we're getting more virtual reality and augmented reality things, we're kind of getting more and more hardware looped into things. Where I see a lot of different collaboration is in some of our research initiatives. We recently had a workshop on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we had patients and providers and payers. By that, I mean like insurance companies and manufacturers all together kind of discussing their perspectives on artificial intelligence and machine learning, their perspectives on labeling, on post-market monitoring, on bias and all of that. So there are the different workshop opportunities. There are different kind of training and engagement opportunities as well. And then another mechanism that we have, if you have a particular thing that you're engaging on, so particularly like artificial intelligence, machine learning, we have these public dockets where it's possible to put your, maybe you want to share a PowerPoint deck or a paper, a presentation, or something that you want us to be considering as we are developing policy and guidances, and contributing that to us kind of gives us a vehicle to respond to whatever you're doing, and also an opportunity to sort of reach out, ask more.
Got it. And how would this work out if you're also interested in potentially patenting something? Then can you, it sounds like these are public repositories.
So whatever. So the public docket is probably not a place where you want to submit your that information. However, anything that you might be submitting to anything you submit to the FDA is not something that is public information. I want to be careful with what might be subject to FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, where somebody can actually request different information. But I don't believe, somebody would have to know exactly what to request. They'd have to know what you shared. And I think there are a number of things that are kind of protected and not at risk there. This is one of those things that like I'm aware of, but I've never actually had to tangle with myself. But anything that you share with us in the inbox or anything like that is something that we keep internal and that we're pretty careful and sensitive about. So, and we try to do a pretty good job helping you understand the guardrails of different decisions you're making. So, for example, you might be developing a product that, maybe 5 years in, you might want to be doing something that's making more kind of diagnostic or treatment recommendations, but in the shorter term, you're doing more of a lifestyle tracking or help patient data collection or something that is not necessarily subject to oversight.
Thanks.
Is there anything that folks maybe thought wasn't a medical device that they realize actually, hey, that might be a medical device? Did anybody learn anything unexpected here?
So I have a question about the carve-outs. And so I was just wondering if you could perhaps just clarify that a little more as to the implications of the, sort of the broad category. And then does that mean now that we have more work to do, or what's the case?
Well, that's a a great question. So the sort of the carve outs or the the results from the changes to the 21st Century Cures Act are it's an interesting space, and we have pretty significant guidances written on all of those. So in some cases, if you fall within the space, you're either not considered a device at all, or you're sort of within the enforcement discretion camp. And what that means is that like, the FDA is not going to go look at your product and kind of dig into things so long as you're falling within that space. Now, if you are kind of falling within the carve out, so if we give an example of something, so if this is something, if you have a product that's intended for maintaining or encouraging a healthy lifestyle, or helping someone live well with, for example, autism, right? As long as you're kind of within that space, so living well with versus a treatment to. While it's kind of within that space, there's no specific, that the oversight is that may not be subject to oversight. However, if down the line that product might evolve into something that's more treatment or diagnostic related, you might want to begin kind of taking the steps toward making sure that the product is meeting the requirements of something that might be looked at by the FDA, which means having a quality system or traceability. If you're intending to go into the space where it might be considered a device later. So I think to answer the question of, do you have more work or less work? I would say, for folks doing lower risk things that are outside of the definition of a device, it's if you're not if you're not submitting your product to the FDA, then you likely have a different workload than if you were. However, if down the line you may be engaging with the FDA, it might be helpful for helping you think about what you might want to have in place down the line. Was that confusing?
It was very official. Thank you.
Well, here's a question not about your talk, Aubrey. From what I know, you don't have extensive policy experience before you took this job, nor are you trained as a lawyer. How did you get from where you were to where you are now? Because there are other people on this call who might be, is digital health growing? Are there new jobs? And sort of how did that work? You came from an HCI place or even a design place.
Right. That's a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking that. So my background is I started out in industrial design. I have a master's in human computer interaction. I've mostly been doing user experience and product development throughout my career. A lot of prototyping, playing with lasers, lots of field research, participatory design. And so how did I wind up on a policy team? I think a really important thing that I want everyone to take away from this is, yes, the Division of Digital Health is hiring, and the FDA is absolutely the most amazing culture that I've ever worked in. It's just very supportive. It's true that I do not have a policy background. Although a lot of the folks I work with have very deep public policy backgrounds. They have, master or PhD in public policy, but they don't have a lot of experience actually developing and deploying devices. And so a big part of my role is trying to interpret how, a particular product might fall within the guidance, within the policies, and also thinking about what new policies we might need to put in place to address the needs of new technologies. So that's another thing. The group definitely specifically brought me in. I remember meeting with the director, and he said, well, you know, you've got a really valuable background. We can teach you the policy side of things, which I think is a tremendous opportunity. And I'm definitely learning a lot. And as Mark pointed out, you can tell by my answers that I am not a lawyer, and I'm relatively new to policy. I started at the FDA in March of 2021, at the very end of March. So it's been an adventure, but I've had the opportunity to work with many different research organizations, to be working on standards, to be, you know, participating in some of these big public workshops. And then, you know, from the point of view of everybody here, working on really engaging with folks developing really exciting products. And unfortunately, I can't tell you some of the most exciting things that I've seen, but like, you know, think along the lines of like, what crazy things could you do with something in the form factor of a hearing aid, or like, what all could you do with VR that we maybe never even thought of. And then we're seeing a lot of these different pediatric virtual reality applications, but virtual reality headsets by the manufacturer are indicated only for individuals over 13. So if somebody wants to have a medical device that's specifically for kids under 13, and they want to do their clinical trials, how do we regulate that? How do we think about that? And so those are the sorts of things that I'm involved in. I like to say that, like, you know, in my previous work in startups as a founder, as a researcher, you know, sometimes you're a big fish, sometimes you're a small fish. You know, I might be working at Intel, I might be working at a startup, and now I'm like the ocean, you know, so it's a very different way to be thinking about how my skills and experiences can allow me to improve quality of life.
That's a great place to end. Thank you, Aubrey. Come back.
Yeah,
We'll check in with you in a few months or a year and see how it goes.
Oh, the
Yep,
ocean's
yep.
going.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm intrigued.
Go ahead.
No, I'm intrigued with the connections between policy and standards, because only recently have I begun to understand that actually those things structure almost everything we do. And so I'm used to being in the idea space before there's a product, before there's even really much. But now I start to realize how much our inventions are guided and structured by the policies and standards environment that we live in. We have a guy who's a friend of ours who's a standards nut, and I finally began to understand why it matters. So thank you.
We do a lot of engaging on standards and some of these new standards that are coming into place, and then also updating standards. So a lot of folks may have heard of the software validation verification guidance, which is actually 20 years old. And but you know, it's good stuff, you know. It's some of these different guidances and standards are actually pretty interesting and valuable to engage with. And I know we're pretty much out of time. I saw someone come off of or turn their video on. Does anyone else have questions before we go?
Well, Elijah just showed up in video, and he took the wearables class last year, and is I think planning on doing it again, and is got some idea. He's got his wearable right there. I have to jump off the call to go get a booster shot.
Oh,
so
sure.
Thank you again.
See you, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Aubrey. Really interesting stuff.
Yep. I mean, the big takeaway is it's a great place to work. And if you have any questions, like reach out to Digital Health. You know, we're friendly folks. And a lot of folks, I think, are afraid to engage with the FDA, and you really shouldn't be. And Elijah, did you have a question?
I mean, yeah, so we're working right now on a project to basically measure full knee extensions. Like after knee surgery, one of the biggest problems that people have is not hitting full extension when they're like walking around. And so we're working on a knee brace that tries to measure that and give you some feedback when you're not hitting full extension. Do you have any like, I don't know, guidance on like which directions we should go in terms of like getting this like past just the idea stage into the actual like product stage?
So, okay, you asked a different question than I thought. In terms of thinking about how that might be interpreted, I'm going to request that you write the inbox, because anything that comes out of the inbox has been vetted by like 3 people to make sure that it's like completely accurate, and they'll also share really helpful guidances and whatever you might need to know to sort of move forward in development. In terms of, well, from a regulatory perspective, in terms of what to do from a product development perspective, typically that's something that I would be sort of more excited to talk about. That's definitely outside of the scope of what I do at FDA now. But what I would say is make sure to get both patients and clinicians involved in your development. So if you can find a clinician who is specifically maybe doing a lot of knee surgeries to be an advisor, engage with you, I think that would be incredibly valuable to do that. And this is absolutely not representing FDA as I'm saying this, but and also engaging patients. And from the point of view of product development and what you may be doing later, keep track of all of those things that the patients and the providers say, because the voice of the customer, the user, and the user is both the clinician or the care provider as well as the patient. That will often be something that you wind up sharing with FDA as part of your development process, as part of the traceability of your product.
Well, the first step is we got to get it to kind of work before we can get to there.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I can't comment on. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course. I think we're kind of out of time. Again, the sort of parting remarks are Digital Health Center of Excellence is amazing. They're definitely hiring people in the technology space and putting a lot of effort into getting folks who have some industry experience and some mixed backgrounds of experience. I feel like my UX background has been highly appreciated. User-centered design has been a really valuable. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
That was great.
thanks
Yes.
for being up, Ellen. Thank you for being awake.
Yeah, this is 3:30 my time, so I'm not awake. Okay, thank you. And I will post the link somewhere after we edit it. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Cut up. Okay.
Cut the front.
See you all.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.